Welcome back to another episode of Optimal Game State. This week, my hobby has been a little bit slow, and I've been avoiding painting the models I have on my desk. Instead, I decided to make a few updates to the Warcry card creator. If you're not familiar, I'm going to give a quick overview of it. If you are and you just want to find out what's new, feel free to skip ahead. Then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about GW support for Warcry, and why I feel tools like this one are important. Most people who use this tool probably just use the fighter section. So the fighter section, you can change the name, you've got details, you can alter the move, the toughness, the points. There's rune marks, there's lots of different weapons, you can enable a second weapon. You can upload an image, so you can have your image sitting there. One feature that I quite enjoy is the rune mark name, so you can have it bang right there. And we've got a few, pre-done ones. These don't have the image, but it'll help you get all of the other stats up there and ready. So, if you've got your, like I do, your new Cities of Sigmar box, you can go in, you can find your free guild general. There, you've got some stats for them. I would double check everything in this. This list here is done with the support of the Warcry data team, which is just a bunch of independent players trying to get together and help get these sites going. Details might be incorrect. I would double check everything with the official rules whenever you're using them. Anyway, most people will be familiar with that. It is very useful. You can, get your own images up. There's lots of different options for different styles. You can kind of fit it the way you want it, the way that's going to work for you, which I think is good. These are not always available. So for the fighter cards, we don't have them for a lot of factions, and the options aren't there just because the cards were never reprinted into 2.0. So if you want a card and it hasn't been printed by GW, this is a good place to go. You can remove the outside border, and this is across all of them, which will mean when you send it off to get printed as a with one of the printing companies for cards, they'll be able to get a nice professional finish on the edges. Okay, so that is the fighter one. People enjoy it. It's good. You're probably familiar with it yourself if you're looking at this channel. We also have the abilities. The abilities, I think, are a little bit less used. We have a lot of the kind of similar features. So you can move the border for printing. You can add the rune mark names. One thing that I want to mention here, I'm not going to go into great detail on everything, but there is a 7th option. So now it'll have 7 of the abilities. For most of the bespoke, so most of the Warcry specific factions, there are 6 abilities and the reaction. So putting in the 7th does mean you can have all 7 sitting on the card. Another feature that I think often gets missed from this, and personally I have found myself using a lot more, is if you remove all but the first 3, or you can evenly space in it, this is a perfect size for just a normal kind of playing card style. So rather than having all of your abilities on one kind of half A4 size, you can just have them in card format. We originally put this together for the Bladeborn warbands, so the ones that you'd get out of Underworlds, but I don't know, I've just found it useful. So I've actually made a few of these for like the universal abilities, and yeah, it's just super handy. And again, we do have the things loaded up, so if you wanted to get your universal reactions in here, yeah, that's a bit of a big one. Might have to make a space there. Ooh, sorry, second, third, okay. And then if we enable the third one, and basically work through it that way. Then the next option you have is objects. So objects is kind of a catch-all for everything else. So it's relatively simple. We've got text at the top, text at the bottom. This one's a little bit more featured. So I've got some font sizes for a little bit more customization. That's across all of them. We can, a few different backgrounds, so you can go for different looks. And if you wanted, you could load in an object or an image. So we found this one to be super handy when using the new blessings. So they featured in the video I did on the blessings. And you can also use it for the campaign bits and pieces. Wounds in particular, I found it quite useful for keeping track of them because they're the same card size as the fighter cards. So you're able to keep them with them, bundle with them, keep them close. And you can also do that with traits, and you can do it with artifacts. So it's super handy for just general bits and pieces like that to keep track of. The new piece we have is the missions. So the idea here is to give us all the tools we need to make or replicate the cards that you got to develop your missions. So if you can recall, there are 4 in total. You've got deployment, which we can see an example of here. You've got terrain, which typically was just a picture of a laid out map with the arrows showing which way is up. Then we've got the victory condition, and we've got the twist. So this particular section is designed to be able to do all of that. Now, for the twist and for the victory condition, they're largely just text. So it's relatively straightforward to do. We could have done that with the objects we wanted. The terrain layout is basically just a picture. Again, I'll show you how I work through that. So this one is kind of where the work is in the deployment. So there's a bunch of different things we can do in here. So first up, we have the characteristics. Big chunk here, and then a mission type. Obviously, if you want to, you can leave something blank, and it just won't appear. You could do the same for the title if you wanted. The orientation, for some of these cards, we'll put it in. For some of them, we won't. So we won't put it in for the victories and the twists, but we will put it in for the terrain, and we will put it in for the deployments. We have an option to make things white if we wanted. And the symmetrical symbol down here is for some of the terrain, for some deployments. If they're the same on both sides, then you can put the symbol in as a kind of reminder. So typically the match play ones have it that way, but maybe not always. Anyway, white is an option to kind of flip that. Let's look at red deployment. Everything here has an X and a Y. So here's our red hammer. If we move the X, it adjusts, and the dimensions adjust and kind of flip into place. You can go all the way around. If we want this to be, deploying on turn 2, we can change that. Turn 2 goes to turn 3, turn 4. Let's stay at turn 4. We put it back to turn 1, that goes away. And we have an option here to make it a line deployment. So the notation there is disappeared. And if we move over to the edge, now we can see that this line is where we're going to deploy on. As long as you're staying on that line, it'll stay there. As soon as you get into the middle, it'll assume you're going for the full span of the deployment. And if we move over to one of the other sides, you can see it's doubling up because we're on the corner. It'll just track wherever you are. So we've now got all the deployments in there, which is kind of handy. And then this extra option down here, just to remove the red deployment if you wanted. There will be some scenarios where you'll want to do that. And we've got one here for moving the blue deployment. Again, exactly the same. We're able to move all of our different options around. We can delay the deployment if we want, or put on the edges if we need. We've also got some objectives. So I've got a total of 6 objectives here. They're all starting at 0 and 0. So they're all up in this corner here. That's the X and Y. They all have an icon. So icon 0 means it's not there. And then 1 is this one. So we can move that around. And once it gets in the middle, we know it's in the middle. And then we've got a total of 9 icons. So this one is the kind of standard objective one. And then we've got 1 out of each of the icons that are available in the box. I never really understood why we had so many, but the option is there. So, we can use them if we wanted. And, you can add all 6 of them if you wanted. You can have them different symbols, and you can move them around. And then, obviously, when they're moved into position, we've got kind of clear indication of where they are. This next bit here, so the deployment gives you everything you need for deployment. The objectives are a bit of a strange one. Objectives aren't actually on the main boxes or on the main cards that we got, for example, in the Heart of Gur, but we do occasionally have some cases where we will want to have everything there. So a scenario where you've got all of your deployment, and you also want to indicate some objectives at the same time. This would normally happen if you've got a battle plan, basically where you're not randomizing the deployment and the mission. And a victory condition. You want those to be both there. You have the option to do it here if you want. So that's kind of an example of something where you've got the deployment details at the same time. And then, you'd write up whatever the victory is and have it all. So normally it happens in kind of a pack, like a tournament or something along those lines. And the option is there. It's to have it. Down here, we have remove deployment. So we just get rid of it completely. Going to leave the direction one up here. And I'm going to see if I can find one of the terrain images. So terrain, got lots of stuff in here. I've been doing lots of work. Check downloads. One should just called terrain. So this is just a picture of one of the maps I did. This is actually a game in process. You can see guys on it. And if I scale it down to the right size, and we can move it around. If we wanted to, we could take the name off, or we could leave it there if you wanted to have your terrain deployments named out. So this is a case where, you'd put down your terrain and then take a picture of it straight down, and then take another picture, redo the terrain in a different format, and you can build out your own options with your own terrain and then put it back into place after you randomly draw the card. The setup that they had was really nice. One of the problems of it was only ever the terrain that you got out of the boxes. So if you had a lot of cool terrain that you didn't get cards for, you weren't able to use the terrain cards. But with this, you can. So it kind of opens up that option, which I think is nice. I do recommend removing borders if you need to, but this is just going to be a square, so you're probably easier to trim it down and we can move around. Just going to reset that, so back here. And the next section is text. So I am going to see if I can find one of the examples. So here's a victory condition, hidden false. Oh, not the one I wanted. All right, mission cards. And there'll be a link to these in the notes if that's something you're interested in. So I think the comment's probably a good one. Yeah, so this is a decent example. In this one, we actually do have an image overlaid in it as well. So we use the terrain image to sneak in this little bit here. So we can move that into a slightly better position. There we go. So it's a simple text piece. When we put double asterisks on either side, it'll make a section bold. If we wanted, we can actually pick out just one section and then it'll become bold. So nice and simple. Place L objective, that is a typo. That should be a 1. And yeah, we can, there's not much for this one, and we do the same for a twist. What is interesting is that we can do different backgrounds. So that's a normal plain background. We could go for a complete grr. Got a few different options here. And then if we get into one of the ones that are quite dark, so yeah, you're not able to see the text there at all, what we can do is we can then go back up here and flick. So now that's in white. You've got plenty of options on how you want to do it, and there is an option in here to load in your own custom background. So you can, really kind of personalize it. As with everything else, there is an option to save it as a card, and then that just turns up as, oh, you can't see that, just turns up as an image. And we also can save it as a file, which means it'll save it as a JSON file. And if we then load that up, it'll be there. So we've got all the details. I do have a couple of options saved into the notes. And, hopefully that's something that you'll be able to kind of use as an inspiration or as a kind of a starting point to work from. I've also got some card backs linked in the description, all with the borders removed so they'll print out nicely if you're doing cards. To wrap up, I want to talk a little about Games Workshop and why I feel tools like this and general player community support is important. Games Workshop is a publicly traded company, and despite its relatively small size as a company, it is very profitable. That's largely because their market is huge. They make high quality miniatures, but the actual production costs for those miniatures are relatively small, and they sell them for as much as they can. That single miniature that they sell for $40 probably only costs them maybe like $2 to make. Now, this isn't a dig at the company, it's just how it works. What's notable for this conversation is how products compete internally for development time with the design team, production time in the factory, and storage space in the warehouses and stores. That's probably why we never saw a mission card pack or fighter card packs for 2.0. It's possible the products didn't sell well first time around, but it's also possible that they did sell well, but that the production cycle they were competing with, there was something that was going to sell more. I'm sure there are people in GW who would love to make rules for the infamous Nethermaze warbands, but as they're now out of print, there's no financial incentive for the company. It sucks. And honestly, I think the company, if it was a little smarter, would better understand how strategic investments, like giving the design team time to make the rules, keep them up to date, get those new profiles out, making narrative content, and releasing that free online to encourage us to buy more models, is profitable. But they're looking at high markups and they're trying to justify it internally. And unfortunately, that's where the gaps come in. And this is where the player community steps in. Our motivation is purely on having a good time with friends. We do like the resources of the company, but we also don't have the same constraints. So I can spend my time working on the card creator, while GW's web team struggle to keep the Warband builder up to date. Warcry.net has up-to-date rules and a profile compendium with all the errata and lots of content, while the GW store no longer sells tons of content, like the Bladeborn Warbands from the Tome of Champions 2021, lots of the old narrative rules that were in the 2 Warband boxes. The books are gone. You just can't get it anymore. I did actually have a look at the website recently, and you cannot buy mission cards anymore. The Heart of Gur box is gone, and they don't come with the Norwood Watch Camp terrain box. Similarly, we've just had a big release for the Orcs in Age of Sigmar, but we haven't had any updates for the rules in Warcry. It honestly seems like a no-brainer, but GW has been willing to put the resources in. So, Dan at the Salty Sea has been putting together some profiles himself. Hopefully he keeps at it, as he's someone I trust to get it right. So for my own games, anything that he produces is as good as a GW release. And that'll encourage me to buy some more of the Orc models so I can play with them. We also have some amazing projects like the Warcry Mordheim mashup, which I'll link in the description. I've talked about it a few times before, and I definitely think the Warcry rules are top tier, but I prefer my setting a little bit more focused than we currently have it. So in this case, we have a best of both worlds scenario. These are all things that GW really should be doing. But due to the nature of big business, the staff who could be doing all this cool stuff are busy, probably making new Space Marine lieutenants. Maybe that's a little soulless, but it's got a better profit margin for the company. Luckily, when they do get a chance to work on Warcry, they make some fantastic stuff that keeps us going. And while we wait for Nethermaze and the Hexbane Hunters, oh my god, how do we not have the Hexbane Hunters rules? In the meantime, the players can get creative. If you haven't done so already, I highly recommend joining the Discord. I'll link it in the description. There are tons of other players producing content to keep this game alive and keep it going. Alright, that's me. Hope you enjoyed the updates, so we can now put together some custom cards to make some really unique missions. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.